Howdy, howdy, you're in the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. The legendary Tom Morello has blessed us all with a new album entitled The Atlas Underground Fire. He released that on October 15th. This is his second full-length solo album, follows 2018's The Atlas Underground. And I'm a big fan of Tom's solo. I really like his stuff. You think about his body of work, prolific over 30 years. But it's only recently that we started getting solo stuff. He's always made music in a band or in some type of collaborative effort. Now, don't get me wrong. I absolutely adore Rage Against the Machine. Love Audioslave, love Prophets of Rage. I don't think he's made any bad music in any of these efforts over the last 30 years. But what I will say is that when you make music with other people, ultimately there is compromise. That end product, that vision that's there is one that is still collective. And so, given the type of musician that Tom is, given the number of influences that are driving him creatively, I always found the idea of a solo project very enticing with him. That's why I love the Atlas Underground. That's why I was really excited to see him put out the Atlas Underground Fire. And, some of you might be saying, well, all of the songs on these albums are collaborations in and of themselves. And you're absolutely right about that. But Tom is still the driving force on both of these records and all of these songs. And what I'll say is that when he's working on a collaboration or in any one of those groups, you're working with the same people on all of those songs. Tom is a guy that, like I said, draws on a number of different influences. And so there are very few musicians, when you look at the list of guest appearances on this record, very few musicians that can get away with this. But it speaks to Tom and how unique he is, how special he is as a musician. And I really love the way that this album ended up coming together. He talks about his first 4 months of COVID, like most of us, miserable for him. He's a guy that's used to being on the road, used to being in the studio for 30 years up to that point, and wasn't able to do any of that. And so he didn't pick up his guitar for 4 months, finally did, finally started writing riffs, getting back into it, and he'd send stuff off to people randomly. There was no rhyme or reason to why he'd send a riff to any particular band or artist, but he would just do it. And I think it's really cool. Like anybody that responded, he continued working with them on that track. It served as inspiration for an EP that came out in October of 2020. He put out the Catastrophist EP with the Beat Roots back in June. And so with all that material there, it's cool to see this project finally drop. And again, I'm really just loving the great guest appearances on this thing. It opens up with Harlem Hellfighter, which structurally is very much an intro track, but it's hard-hitting, big electronic element, big hard rockin' element with Tom Morello and his guitar, and a little homage with that Harlem reference there. Tom was born in Harlem, so he definitely is a Harlem Hellfire if there ever was one. Your second track, Highway to Hell, you're damn right. That is a cover of AC/DC's Highway to Hell. This is one of the moments on the record where I'm impressed by Tom because I think despite featuring Bruce Springsteen and Eddie Vedder, something about the energy is just a little off. It just falls a little short. Sadly, the story behind the song is much better, and I'll tell it because it's great. Tom talks about how he was down in Australia on tour. He went to go pay his respects to Bon Scott, was in the cemetery and couldn't find his grave. All of a sudden, this dude rides up. He's got a German World War II helmet on and a shirt that says, "I don't give a shit, but if I did, I'd give it to you." And so Tom is like, this guy definitely knows where Bon Scott's grave is. So ultimately, he's able to find it, pays his respects. Bruce Springsteen and Eddie Vedder are down in Australia at that time, and they just feel inspired to come together and put this track together. And it's I love where their hearts are at. I just think it misses the mark a little bit. But when that happens on this record, Tom is making up for it with his guitar. And I'm feeling that way about your third track, Let's Get the Party Started. It features a band called Bringing Me the Horizon. Not really a fan, British rock band that I just, I'm not digging their style. But, I still think that Tom's impact, even with all of these guest appearances, is still in control. It's still there at the helm, and he can still manage to put together an amazing collaboration with a band that I don't really like. And I think some of you might find a couple of these collaborations you might be hesitant to check them out. But I would do it just to listen to Tom, just to see what he's doing with his guitar on those tracks. Then we get into just the beef of this thing. I really love the rest of this record. Driving to Texas, featuring Phantogram. Love Phantogram. I love the 80s goth, the glam synth that this track has. And Morello's just raying just sick, heavy riffs over this song. My heart melted when I listened to it. This is exactly the type of collaboration that I was looking for on this record. The War Inside is your fifth track. Chris Stapleton there. Country-style rocker, as you might expect. Kind of think of what Sturgill Simpson was doing about 3 years ago, but this is another collaboration, very unique. It's working, definitely speaks to Tom and his unique nature and his ability to just draw on any number of influences. Hold the Line is your sixth song, funky hip hop oriented track featuring Grandson. And then Naraka is your seventh track featuring Mike Posner. Really like this track. The verses are light, and then the chorus hits hard. It's got a heavy trap influence. Really digging the contrast and style in that song. Your eighth track, The Achilles List, blues, reggae, and hard rock coming together on this thing. It features Damian Dr. Gong Marley. Yeah, if you could imagine blending reggae and hard rock and blues, this is what it would probably sound like. And another thing to talk about Tom, his sound always been rooted in the blues, and I think it speaks to something bigger that this album's cool, Tom is cool. He's one of those guys that, all that pop music, no matter what you're listening to, is rooted in that blues sound. And it's really why you're able to get away with an album and bring something together that has this continuity, that has hip-hop, that has country, that has rock and roll, that has electronic dance music, that has all these different things going on. It's pretty impressive. Night Watch, your ninth track, funky electro song there. Your 10th song, Charmed, I'm sure, features Prototype. I'm not a big fan of dubstep, but you got a dubstep rocker here that hit all the right ways. I was pretty impressed by that. That was one of those moments where I kind of wasn't sure. I listened to it again, and I ended up, I'll admit it, I really liked it. Your penultimate track, Save Our Souls, features Dennis Lyxzén and then Refused. If you're not familiar with Refused, they put out an album called The Shape of Punk to Come years ago. That record is amazing. When I saw that Tom was going to collaborate with Refused on that track, was really excited to check that out. And then On the Shore of Eternity is your final song. This thing is 8 minutes long. I cannot wait to remix this song, play it in the club. This song sounds like Tom just busted out the turntables, started DJing, and then laid his guitar over it for 8 minutes. It's so much fun. It really was kind of what I was hoping for on this record. And when I saw the runtime, and as I was listening to this, the anticipation began to build and build, and that song didn't disappoint. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you're going to dig this whole record. Like I said, even in those moments where it might, waver a little bit, Tom's guitar is going to keep it together for you. Really nicely done. Going to vinyl please this thing. I hope you find this review helpful. Hope you enjoy listening to this album as well. Please like and share this video. Stay tuned for more album reviews throughout the week, and we'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.